My friend is mad at me for making people laugh at a party. I've known Chase for 6 years now, and we've always been total opposites. He's the smooth, socially confident guy who somehow knows everyone on campus. Me? I'm the dork who spent last Saturday night reorganizing my Pokemon card collection while rewatching The Office. We're friends, but we exist in completely different universes when it comes to social situations. So when Chase asked me to come to a house party as his wingman, I was shocked. He'd finally gotten somewhere with Sophia, this person he'd been obsessing over for weeks. Sophia was going to be at this party, and Chase needed backup. He made it very clear what my role was. Stand nearby, laugh at his jokes, make him look good by comparison. Just be there, he said. And please don't quote movies or talk about your Pokemon collection. I agreed because my internet was down anyway. Now here's the thing about my social skills. They're entirely theoretical. Last week I binged Friends on Netflix and took actual notes. The day of, I was a mess. I stress-baked brownies while watching Best of Friends party scenes, compilation videos on YouTube. I Googled how to small talk at parties and screenshotted the results. I put on my good graphic tee, it only had one small hole near the hem, and jeans that actually fit. When I walked in holding my labeled Tupperware, Chase's face went through several emotions. Dude, did you seriously label your brownies? The party was exactly what I'd feared. Loud music, too many people, nowhere to hide. Chase immediately steered me toward a corner. I'm gonna go find Sophia. Just stay here and try to blend in. But I needed water. My mouth was desert dry from anxiety, so I escaped to the kitchen. That's where everything went wrong. Or right, depending on how you look at it. I started organizing the snacks by color because that's what I do when I'm nervous. Some girl noticed and laughed. Are you color-coding the chips? It's soothing, I admitted. Then Panic remembered a line from Friends. Could this be any more organized? I did the Chandler emphasis thing with my hands. She laughed harder. Not mean laughing, genuine laughing. Then Sophia walked in looking for ice. I held out my Tupperware like an offering. Brownie? They're stress brownies. I mean, regular brownies. I made them while stressed. But they're not, like, medicated or anything. Sophia's entire face lit up. Did you just say stress brownies? I tried to recover by doing Joey's signature head nod and, how you doing? But I said it way too earnestly, like I was actually asking about her well-being. I'm good, Sophia said, clearly amused. How are you doing? Oh, no, that was supposed to be, never mind. I mentioned I'd been watching Friends to prepare for this party. Sophia nearly choked on the brownie. Wait, you studied for a party? I have Joey's best pickup lines written on my palm, I admitted, showing my smudged hand. That's when the kitchen became party central. Sophia started telling everyone about my party training. Someone suggested we share our worst social advice. The host confessed they'd hidden their Nintendo Switch in the oven in case the party sucked. We created a drinking game, with water, in my case, where everyone shared their most embarrassing social prep stories. I taught them Ross's pivot, yell for navigating crowded spaces. Sophia kept laughing and touching my arm. At one point she said, "You're like if someone learned to be human from watching TV. It's adorable." Chase kept trying to lure Sophia back to the main room, but Sophia stayed in the kitchen, sitting on the counter next to my color-coded snack arrangement, asking about my Pokemon collection after overhearing me mention it to someone else. Chase said not to bring that up, I said. Chase is wrong. Tell me about your favorites. That's when I got the text. Stop whatever you're doing. Chase appeared in the doorway, gesturing frantically. I excused myself, still holding my labeled Tupperware. In the hallway, Chase was practically vibrating. What are you doing? You're supposed to be invisible. I'm using the techniques, like Joey says. This isn't a sitcom. You were supposed to be furniture, background, not the entertainment. I'm just talking about Pokemon and organizing snacks. Sophia asked if you're single. She was supposed to ask that about me. I stared at him, processing this. She asked about me? This isn't funny, Ben. You're ruining everything. Just go back to your corner and stop being so noticeable. But when I returned to the kitchen, Sophia pulled me aside. I've read all the requirements carefully. I need to write a seamless continuation of the story in a single paragraph, covering beats 1 to 10, using simple vocabulary, minimal dialogue, maximum 5%, and focusing on action, 97%. The story should feel like a real Reddit post, continue naturally from where it left off, with Sophia pulling Ben aside in the kitchen, and be between 1,600 to 2,000 words. I'll maintain the casual, authentic voice and avoid any literary flourishes or complex words. Here is the story continuation. She leaned against the counter next to the sink where I'd organized all the plastic cups by size earlier, and her eyes had this warm, curious look that made my stomach do something weird. She asked if I was actually single, or if that was just more of my awkward charm, and my brain completely stopped working for a second because I couldn't tell if she was joking or serious. I managed to say yes, I'm single, which came out way too quiet, so I had to repeat it louder, and she smiled like that was exactly the answer she wanted to hear. Through the doorway, I could see Chase standing with his arms crossed, watching us, and my phone buzzed in my pocket with another text that I was way too nervous to check. My hands were shaking a little bit, so I set down my Tupperware on the counter next to the color-coded chips. And Sophia kept looking at me like she was waiting for me to say something else, but I had absolutely no idea what that should be. Someone bumped into me from behind, trying to get to the fridge, and I stumbled forward a step, which made Sophia laugh and steady me with her hand on my shoulder. I finally pulled out my phone because it wouldn't stop buzzing, and when I saw Chase's message, it just said in all caps, "Stop whatever you're doing," with 3 exclamation points. Sophia must have noticed my face change because she asked if everything was okay, touching my arm lightly, and I fumbled through some explanation about my friend needing me for something important. She said she hoped I'd come back to the kitchen soon, and the way she said it made my heart do that weird, complicated thing again, where I couldn't tell if I was excited or scared or guilty, or all 3 at once. I excused myself and started pushing through the crowd toward where I'd seen Chase standing, still holding my phone with his angry message glowing on the screen. The living room was packed with people dancing and talking loud over the music, and I had to squeeze past groups of students who were all way more comfortable in this situation than I was. Chase grabbed my arm the second I got close enough and pulled me into the hallway near the bathroom, and his face had that tight look he gets when he's trying really hard not to yell. He said in this harsh whisper that I was supposed to be making him look good, not stealing the spotlight and definitely not flirting with Sophia right in front of him. I tried to explain that I was just being myself and talking about Pokemon like he specifically told me not to, which I realized even as I said it was probably not helping my case at all. He cut me off and said this wasn't about Pokemon or sitcom references. It was about me completely ignoring the one job I had tonight, which was to be invisible and supportive. I started to respond, but then Nyla came down the hallway asking everyone to please keep the noise down, because a neighbor had just knocked on the door to complain about the music. She spotted me still holding my labeled Tupperware and laughed, saying the color-coded snacks were honestly the best part of her party, and a couple people standing nearby agreed really enthusiastically. One guy said he'd never seen chips organized by color before, and it was strangely satisfying, and someone else asked if I did party planning professionally. Chase's jaw got really tight, and I could see him trying to keep his face neutral, while more attention landed on me, instead of him blending into the background like furniture the way he'd wanted. Nyla asked if I could help her convince people to turn down the music before the neighbor called the cops, and I said sure, even though talking to a whole room of strangers sounded absolutely terrifying. Chase walked away without saying anything else, heading toward the front door, and I felt this uncomfortable weight settle in my chest, like I'd broken something important without meaning to. I followed Nyla back to the kitchen where most of the noise was coming from, and Sophia was still there sitting on the counter next to my snack arrangement. She suggested we could find somewhere quieter to talk, maybe the back porch or even leave to grab food somewhere, and I was incredibly tempted because talking to her felt surprisingly easy compared to everything else happening tonight. But I glanced toward the front of the house where Chase had gone and told her I should probably stay and help my friend tonight, even though saying it out loud made me feel like I was choosing wrong somehow. She looked disappointed but nodded and said she respected that I was loyal to my friends, even when it got complicated, which made me feel slightly better, and also much worse at the same time. I found Chase near the front door putting on his jacket like he was about to leave, and I tried to smooth things over by promising I'd be way less noticeable for the rest of the night. He cut me off before I could finish and said I needed to be completely invisible from now on, just stand in a corner, and don't talk to anyone, and especially don't talk to Sophia anymore. The way he said it made me feel like a broken prop instead of an actual person, and something uncomfortable settled deeper in my chest. I wanted to argue that I hadn't done anything wrong on purpose, but he looked so frustrated that I just nodded and said okay. When I got back to the kitchen, someone had the idea that we should all navigate through the crowded hallway using my pivot technique from earlier. And suddenly half the party was yelling it while trying to move furniture and squeeze past each other in tight spaces. Nyla pulled out her phone and started filming it, laughing, and posted it to her story right there while people kept shouting pivot and cracking up. I stood there caught between feeling really proud that people liked my joke enough to turn it into a whole thing, and absolutely terrified that I was being way too noticeable when Chase had just told me to disappear. The attention felt good in this warm, validating way I wasn't used to, but it also felt like I was breaking some unspoken rule about staying small and letting other people shine. Nyla suddenly remembered her backup plan and asked if I could help her get her switch out of the oven before someone accidentally turned it on and melted the whole thing. I carefully opened the oven door and pulled out the console while she explained to everyone nearby that she'd hidden it there in case the party turned out boring and she needed an escape plan. She announced to the kitchen that I'd just saved her switch and her party, and people actually cheered, which made me feel strangely competent in a way I definitely wasn't used to feeling at social events. My phone buzzed again, and I checked it to see another message from Chase asking why I was still the center of attention, and I didn't know how to respond because I genuinely wasn't trying to be. Someone banged really hard on the front door, and Nyla rushed to answer it, and we could all hear the neighbor's voice getting louder about the noise and threatening to call the police if it didn't stop immediately. Nyla came back looking stressed and asked everyone to seriously quiet down, or the party was over, and she could get in real trouble with her landlord. The music dropped to a much lower volume, and people started talking in quieter voices, and I helped by gently reminding the kitchen crowd that Nyla could face actual consequences if the noise complaint got official. The whole vibe shifted from fun and chaotic to tense and worried, and my anxiety spiked because conflict and authority figures are basically my two least favorite things combined. At least I was doing something useful instead of just standing around awkwardly trying to figure out where to put my hands, and Nyla thanked me quietly for helping calm people down. Around midnight, I decided I needed to leave because the social energy was completely draining, and I could feel my battery hitting zero fast. Chase was still somewhere in the house, glaring at me from across rooms every time I saw him, and I couldn't handle the tension anymore. I grabbed my empty Tupperware from the counter and headed toward the front door, and Sophia caught me right as I was about to leave. She asked for my number, and I pointed to the label on my Tupperware where I'd written my contact info in case anyone wanted the brownie recipe, which seemed like a good idea when I was stress baking earlier but now felt kind of silly. She pulled out her phone and took a photo of the label, saying she'd text me tomorrow, and I walked home floating on this weird mix of excitement about Sophia and crushing guilt about Chase and complete exhaustion from 3 hours of non-stop social interaction. I drop my backpack on the floor and pull out my journal from the desk drawer, flipping to a blank page. My hand moves across the paper as I write down everything that happened at the party, trying to make sense of it like I'm studying for a test. I list what went right. People laughed at my Chandler impression. Sophia liked the brownies. The pivot moment became a whole thing. Then I list what went wrong. Chase got mad. I was supposed to be invisible. Sophia asked about me instead of him. I grab my phone and scroll through the screenshots of small talk advice I saved earlier, rereading each tip and trying to figure out where I went off script. The advice said to ask questions and listen, which I did, but it also said to let other people shine, which I definitely didn't do. My phone sits on the corner of my desk, and I keep glancing at it every few seconds, hoping to see a notification from Sophia, but also scared that Chase will send another angry text. The screen stays dark, and I go back to my journal, writing about how organizing the snacks by color somehow made people like me instead of think I was weird. I reread my notes 3 times, circling the parts where I deviated from the plan, but I can't figure out why being myself worked better than following the script. My eyes feel heavy, and I finally close the journal around 2 in the morning, setting my phone on the nightstand where I can hear it if anyone texts. The alarm on my phone buzzes at 9, and I grab it immediately, squinting at the bright screen. 2 text notifications stare back at me, and my stomach does something uncomfortable as I unlock the phone. The first message is from Sophia. "Thanks for making last night actually fun. You're hilarious and genuine, and I'd love to grab coffee sometime if you're free." The second message is from Chase, and it's much longer. "I can't believe you completely derailed my entire plan. I asked you to help me look good, and instead you made me look boring by comparison. Sophia barely talked to me all night because she was too busy laughing at your Pokemon stories and your weird snack organization. I needed your help, and you turned it into your own moment." I stare at both messages for what feels like forever, but is probably only 20 minutes. My brain tries to process how the same night made one person happy and another person so upset with me. I read Sophia's message again and feel warm and excited. Then I read Chase's message and feel sick with guilt. My thumbs hover over the keyboard, but I don't know what to type to either of them. The realization hits me that making Sophia smile apparently meant letting Chase down, and I don't know how to fix that, or if I even should try. I throw off my blanket and get out of bed, pulling on jeans and a clean shirt. Texting back feels like hiding, and I need to apologize to Chase face to face, even though the idea makes my hands shake. I grab my keys and wallet, shoving them in my pockets as I head for the door. The walk across campus toward the gym feels longer than usual, and I keep rehearsing what I'll say in my head. "I'm sorry I took attention away from you. I'm sorry I wasn't invisible like you wanted. I'm sorry Sophia liked talking to me. None of it sounds right because I'm not entirely sure what I'm apologizing for. But Chase is my friend, and I hurt him somehow, so I need to at least try. My hands won't stop shaking as I walk past the library and the student center, getting closer to the gym with each step. Before I reach the gym entrance, I stop on the sidewalk and pull out my phone, opening my messages. I need to respond to Sophia before I talk to Chase because leaving her hanging feels wrong. I type out, yes to coffee, but I need to talk to my friend about something important first. Can I let you know when I'm free? I hit send, and her response comes back almost immediately. Of course. Take your time with your friend stuff. Let me know whenever you're ready. The smiley face makes my anxiety ease just a little bit, and I realize that her patience about my friendship drama makes me like her even more. That thought immediately makes the guilt about Chase worse, because here I am thinking about how great Sophia is when I'm supposed to be focused on fixing things with my best friend. I put my phone away and push through the gym doors, scanning the rows of treadmills and weight machines for Chase. I spot him on a treadmill near the back wall, running at a steady pace with earbuds in. I walk over and stand next to his machine, waiting for him to notice me. He glances over and does a double take, then slows the treadmill to a walking speed and pulls out one earbud. I open my mouth to start my apology, but he cuts me off before I can get a word out. Dude, your party skills were insane last night, he says with a forced laugh, still not making eye contact. Who knew you had it in you? I try again to apologize, but he keeps talking over me, making jokes about my surprise social success while his eyes stay fixed on the treadmill display. Every time I start to explain what happened, he deflects with another comment about my Chandler impression or the color-coded snacks. His humor feels like a wall he's putting up between us, and I can't get through it to have an actual conversation. I stand there for another 5 minutes trying to engage with what I actually came to say, but he won't let me address the real problem. Finally, I give up and tell him I'll see him later, walking out of the gym feeling more frustrated than when I arrived. He wouldn't let me apologize or explain anything, just kept making light of the whole situation while avoiding my eyes. That evening, my phone buzzes with a message in a group chat I barely remember joining. Nyla's name appears at the top. Hey everyone who was at the party. The RA needs to follow up on the noise complaint from last night. Can anyone confirm what time things actually quieted down? Trying to give accurate info. My chest tightens as I read the message and realize I might have to talk to an RA officially about party details. Authority figures make me nervous even when I haven't done anything wrong, and the idea of being interviewed about the noise complaint makes me want to go reorganize my entire Pokemon collection as a way to calm down. I respond to Nyla's message with the honest timeline I remember, telling her that people started quieting down around 11:30 after she asked everyone to keep it down. She replies thanking me for the straightforward answer, and I try to ignore the anxiety building in my stomach about potentially having to repeat all this information to the RA in person. The next morning, I meet Sophia at a quiet coffee shop 2 blocks from campus. She's already there when I arrive, sitting at a corner table away from the main crowd near the front. I slide into the chair across from her and she smiles, closing her laptop. We order drinks and she gets something complicated with extra foam and caramel, while I just ask for regular coffee. When the drinks arrive, we start talking about the party without all the noise and chaos surrounding us. The conversation feels surprisingly easy, and I'm not performing or trying to remember which friend's character would say what in this situation. I just respond naturally to whatever she says, and somehow that works better than any script I could have memorized. She laughs at things I say that aren't even jokes, just normal observations about campus or classes, and I start to relax into my chair. Sophia leans forward and tells me she likes people who are intentional about things, even weird things like studying for parties. She says it shows they actually care about connecting with others instead of just winging it and hoping natural charm carries them through. I take a breath and admit that I literally took notes while watching Friends episodes and Googled conversation starters before the party, fully expecting her to think it's pathetic or try hard. Instead, she says it's sweet that I put in real effort, rather than just showing up and hoping for the best. The way she says it makes me feel seen in a way I didn't expect, like my anxiety and over-preparation aren't flaws, but just part of who I am. She reaches across the table and touches my hand briefly, saying that authenticity matters more to her than smooth confidence, and I feel something shift in my chest that I can't quite name. By afternoon, I'm walking between classes when my phone starts buzzing repeatedly in my pocket. I pull it out and see notifications from a group chat I barely participate in, the one with people from my biology lecture. Someone has posted a meme with the caption, "When you color code the party snacks," and several people are commenting with laughing emojis. I scroll up and see more memes about Brownie Guy and the Pokemon Party King, and suddenly people I don't even know are referencing me in their messages. The attention feels strange and overwhelming, like I accidentally became a minor character that everyone on campus recognizes when I was trying to be completely invisible. Part of me feels proud that people noticed me in a positive way instead of making fun of me. But mostly, I'm embarrassed and want to disappear back into the comfortable obscurity I had before the party. I put my phone away and try to focus on getting to my next class, but I can feel people glancing at me in the hallway, and I'm not sure if I'm imagining it or if they actually recognize me as the party organization guy. I'm back in my dorm room that evening working on homework when my phone buzzes with a direct message from Chase. This one is different from his gym deflection, more serious and direct. You need to back off, Safia, or our friendship is over. I've been patient with your main character moment, but you need to remember who you're supposed to be helping here. I asked you to be my wingman, not to steal the person I've been trying to connect with for weeks. Make a choice. I read the message 3 times, and each time it feels like getting punched in the stomach. I value our 6-year friendship more than almost anything, but the way he's framing this ultimatum makes me feel like a servant who failed at his job instead of a friend who deserves respect. The message sits on my screen unanswered, and I don't know what to type back because anything I say will either end our friendship or mean giving up on something real with Safia. I stare at Chase's ultimatum on my screen until the words blur together and my eyes start to hurt. The message sits there demanding an answer I don't have, asking me to choose between a 6-year friendship and whatever might be starting with Safia. I close my phone without responding because anything I type right now will either blow up our friendship or make me feel like I'm giving up something real before it even has a chance to start. My roommate asks if I'm okay, and I just nod while shoving my phone in my pocket, trying to focus on the chemistry homework spread across my desk that suddenly seems way less complicated than my actual life. The next morning, I'm walking between my history lecture and the library when someone crashes into me hard enough that my backpack slides off one shoulder. I stumble sideways and look up to see this girl with long, dark hair and sharp eyes staring at me with an expression that's somewhere between protective and ready to interrogate. She crosses her arms and plants herself directly in my path, blocking the sidewalk like she's been waiting specifically for this moment. I recognize her face from Safia's social media, the roommate who's always in the background of photos making funny faces or photobombing group shots. Kavya doesn't waste time with small talk or pretending this is a friendly chat. She asks point blank what my intentions are with Safia and whether I'm the kind of person who plays games or causes drama, her voice level but firm enough that a couple students walking past glance over curiously. My brain immediately goes into panic mode because confrontation with someone's protective friend feels like a test I didn't study for, and I can feel my palms getting sweaty as I try to figure out how to explain a situation I barely understand myself. I stumble through saying that I genuinely like Safia and didn't plan for any of this to happen, that I was literally supposed to be invisible furniture at that party and somehow ended up being the opposite. Kavya studies my face while I'm talking, her eyes narrowing slightly like she's trying to detect any hint of bullshit or manipulation in my expression. I keep talking because the silence feels worse, admitting that I know the timing is terrible and that Chase is mad at me and that I'm not trying to hurt anyone, but I also can't pretend I don't feel what I feel. She watches me fidget with my backpack strap for a long moment before her expression softens just slightly, enough that I can breathe again. Kavya says she'll be watching how this plays out, but I seem sincere enough for now, then adds that Safia has had enough people in her life who weren't honest about what they wanted. The warning is clear, even though her tone stays relatively friendly, and I nod quickly to show I understand before she steps aside to let me pass. I walk toward the library feeling like I just survived some kind of informal trial, my heart still beating faster than normal from the unexpected confrontation. That evening, I'm trying to focus on reading for my sociology class when my phone buzzes with a message from Nyla. She asks if I can confirm the exact timeline of when the party got loud and when things quieted down after the neighbor complaint, explaining that the RA needs specific details for some official report. I sit up straighter in my desk chair and scroll back through my memory of that night, trying to pin down actual times instead of just the blur of anxiety and unexpected socializing. I text back honestly about what I remember, saying the music was really loud until maybe 11:30 when the neighbor banged on the door, and that Nyla got everyone to cooperate and lower the volume within 10 or 15 minutes. I add that she handled the whole situation really well and got people to actually listen instead of ignoring the complaint or making it worse. Nyla responds quickly, thanking me for being straightforward, then mentions she might face consequences from housing, but she appreciates people who don't make things worse by lying or changing their story. The message makes me feel slightly guilty even though I didn't do anything wrong, like my presence at the party somehow contributed to problems for someone who was actually nice to me. I tell her I hope everything works out okay with housing, and that her party was genuinely fun despite the drama, which feels inadequate but honest. She sends back a simple thumbs-up emoji, and I go back to my reading, though I keep glancing at my phone, wondering if there will be more official questions coming my way. The next morning, I wake up to an email from someone named Andrew with an official university housing address in the signature. My stomach drops immediately even before I finish reading the message, because emails from authority figures always make me feel like I'm in trouble, even when I know logically that I didn't do anything wrong. Andrew asks if I can stop by his office for an informal chat about the party and the noise complaint, emphasizing that it's just to get a complete picture of what happened and that I'm not being accused of anything. The rational part of my brain understands this is standard procedure and that the RA just needs to document everything properly. But the anxious part of my brain is already spiraling into worst-case scenarios about getting in trouble or having to testify at some housing hearing. I spend the next hour mentally preparing for the conversation, rehearsing what I'll say and reminding myself over and over that Andrew is just doing his job and I can answer questions honestly without freaking out. I pull up the email 3 more times to reread it, analyzing the tone for any hint of accusation or anger, but it stays consistently neutral and professional. I type out a response saying I'm available this afternoon if that works, then delete it and rewrite it twice before finally hitting send. My hands are shaking slightly as I get ready for my morning classes, and I can already feel the low-level anxiety that's going to sit in my chest all day until the meeting actually happens. In my afternoon lab class, I decide to test whether I can actually have a normal conversation without relying on sitcom references or my carefully prepared scripts. My lab partner is this quiet guy who usually just focuses on the experiment without much small talk. But today, I use one of the conversation starters I wrote down last night to ask him about his weekend plans. The words feel awkward coming out of my mouth because they're genuinely mine, instead of borrowed from Joey or Chandler, and I have to resist the urge to add a TV show reference to make the question feel safer. He looks up from adjusting the microscope and actually responds with real enthusiasm about a concert he's going to see, and suddenly we're having an actual conversation about music and campus events. I contribute my own thoughts about shows I've been to and bands I like, and the conversation doesn't implode into awkward silence or make him look at me like I'm weird. My lab partner even laughs at something I say about the terrible acoustics in the student center, and it's a genuine laugh at my actual observation, rather than because I quoted a famous sitcom line. The small victory makes me think maybe I'm actually learning to exist socially without constant scripts, that maybe my real personality is enough to connect with people if I just let it out, instead of hiding behind borrowed charm. We finish the lab work while talking about normal things, and when class ends, he suggests we should grab food sometime, which feels like a bigger win than any party moment. I walk out of the science building feeling slightly more confident that I can be myself without completely bombing every social interaction. Between classes, I meet Safia for a walk across the main quad, and the afternoon sun makes everything feel less heavy than the anxious spiral I've been in since Chase's ultimatum. We fall into step together easily, and I carefully bring up the question that's been sitting in my chest like a weight, asking where things actually stand between her and Chase. The question feels risky because I'm not sure I want to hear the answer, but I need to understand the situation before I make any real decisions about what happens next. Safia slows her walking pace and explains that Chase had been flirting with her for weeks leading up to the party, lots of casual conversations and compliments, but nothing that ever turned into an actual date or defined relationship. She says she'd been interested enough to flirt back and see where it went, but they never had the conversation about being exclusive or even seriously dating. The clarification helps because it means I'm not actually stealing someone's girlfriend, but it also makes me realize I'm caught in a complicated situation where Chase's expectations don't match the reality of what actually existed between them. Safia adds that she appreciates me asking directly, instead of just assuming or making moves without checking, which makes me feel slightly better about navigating this mess. We keep walking in silence for a minute while I process everything she's said, watching other students cross the quad with their own drama and complications that I know nothing about. The situation still feels tangled and unfair to everyone involved, but at least now I have actual information instead of just guilt and confusion about whether I'm being a terrible friend. That evening, I'm scrolling through social media when I see Chase's latest post, a vague subtweet about friends who need to study how to be loyal instead of studying how to flirt. Several mutual friends have already liked it, and one person commented with a thinking face emoji, clearly recognizing the call-out, even though Chase didn't tag me directly. The public nature of it stings worse than his private messages, because now other people are watching our friendship fall apart and probably taking sides based on incomplete information. I'm immediately tempted to respond with my own subtweet defending myself, explaining that loyalty doesn't mean being invisible furniture or giving up on real connections to serve someone else's insecurity. My fingers actually start typing out a response about how friendship should be mutual respect instead of one person using another as a prop, but I stop halfway through and stare at the draft. The urge to engage in public social media drama is strong because staying silent feels like accepting blame, but I also know that fighting online will just make everything worse and give people more entertainment at our expense. I close the app and try to resist checking it again, even though my fingers keep itching to open it back up and see if more people have liked Chase's post or if anyone is defending me in the comments. The phone sits on my desk, taunting me with notifications I'm trying to ignore, and I have to physically put it in a drawer to stop myself from getting pulled into the drama spiral. I spend the rest of the evening forcing myself to write out 3 conversation starters that come from my actual interests and personality rather than borrowed from TV shows. The first one is about Pokemon card trading strategies, which feels embarrassingly nerdy but is genuinely something I know about and care about discussing. The second is about stress baking and different brownie recipes I've tried, turning my anxiety coping mechanism into a potential conversation topic instead of something to hide. The third is about organization systems and why color-coding things actually helps reduce mental clutter, which sounds boring when I write it down but is honestly something I could talk about for hours. Looking at these 3 starters feels vulnerable in a way that memorizing Joey's pickup lines never did, because these are pieces of my actual self instead of borrowed charm that keeps me safe from judgment. I'm starting to realize that scripts only work when they match who I actually am, that performing someone else's personality might get laughs, but it doesn't create real connections. I don't throw away my sitcom notes completely because they've helped me survive social situations I would have avoided entirely, but I move them to the bottom of my desk drawer as occasional backup instead of primary strategy. The shift feels both terrifying and necessary, like I'm finally trusting that my genuine awkward self might be enough for people who actually matter. The next morning, I walk into Andrew's RA office expecting some formal, intimidating setup, but instead find a regular dorm room converted into an office space with a desk and a couple chairs. Andrew looks up from his laptop and waves me in with a surprisingly chill expression, gesturing for me to sit in the chair across from his desk. He's wearing a campus housing polo shirt and has the kind of tired eyes that suggest he deals with party drama constantly, and his whole demeanor is more exhausted older student than authority figure. Andrew asks me to walk through what happened at the party from my perspective, starting with when I arrived and ending with when things quieted down after the neighbor complaint. I explain the timeline as honestly as I can, including how I ended up in the kitchen organizing snacks because I was anxious, and how Nyla handled the complaint by getting everyone to cooperate quickly instead of letting things escalate. Andrew nods while taking notes on his laptop, occasionally asking clarifying questions about specific times or how many people were there. He never sounds accusatory or like he's trying to catch me in a lie, just genuinely trying to document what happened for the housing office records. I mentioned that Nyla was really responsible about the whole situation and got people to lower the volume as soon as the issue came up, hoping that detail might help her avoid serious consequences. Andrew looks up from his laptop and says he appreciates straightforward accounts from people who were actually there, adding that I'm not in any trouble but he needed to document everything properly. The relief I feel is immediate and physical, like my shoulders drop about 3 inches from where they've been tensed since I got his email. Andrew asks if I have any questions, and I shake my head, just grateful that the conversation wasn't the nightmare scenario my anxiety had built up in my head. I leave his office feeling lighter than I have in days, checking my phone to see a text from Sophia. The message from Sophia thanks me for helping with the official questions and asks if I want to go for a walk in the park near campus, where it's quieter than coffee shops or dining halls. The invitation feels intentional rather than casual, like she's deliberately creating space for us to talk about real things without the background noise of party chaos or crowded public places. I text back that I'm free now if she is, feeling nervous anticipation rather than the script-dependent panic that usually comes with planned social interactions. We agree to meet at the main entrance in 15 minutes and I head that direction, trying not to overthink what we're going to talk about or what this walk means for whatever is developing between us. The park is mostly empty when I arrive except for a few people walking dogs or jogging on the paths, and Sophia shows up right on time wearing a jacket and carrying a water bottle. We start walking without any specific destination, just following the main path that winds through trees and around a small pond. The silence between us feels comfortable instead of awkward, like we're both gathering thoughts rather than scrambling to fill empty space with meaningless chat. About halfway around the pond, Sophia stops walking and turns to face me directly, asking if I'm actually interested in her or if I'm just caught up in the drama and attention from the party. The directness catches me off guard even though I should have expected it, and I take a breath before admitting honestly that yes, I'm interested in her in a way that feels different from just enjoying party attention or liking that someone noticed me. I add that I won't sneak around or hide anything from Chase though, because that would make everything worse and turn me into exactly the kind of person Kavya was worried about this morning. Sophia's expression shifts to something that looks like relief, and she says that kind of honesty and integrity is exactly why she's interested in me, instead of just seeing me as a funny party story. I explain that I value being upfront even when it's uncomfortable, and if we're going to spend time together, I want to do it honestly, rather than creating more drama through secrecy and sneaking around. She nods and suggests we see where things go while I figure out the Chase situation, acknowledging that the timing is complicated, but that honest complications are better than hidden ones. We agree to take things slowly and let whatever this is develop naturally, instead of forcing it or hiding it. And the conversation feels mature and real in a way that makes me think maybe I can actually navigate complicated social situations without completely destroying everything. We finish walking the loop around the pond, talking about easier things like classes and weekend plans, and when we part ways at the park entrance, I feel hopeful instead of anxious about what comes next. That evening, I sit at my desk with my phone in my hands, staring at the blank message screen with Chase's name at the top. My thumbs hover over the keyboard for a solid 5 minutes before I finally start typing. I explain everything as clearly as I can, how I talked with Sophia at the park, how I'm interested in her, how I wanted him to hear it from me directly, instead of through campus gossip or someone else's version of events. I type that our friendship matters to me and that I hope we can meet in person to talk through everything honestly. My heart pounds so hard I can feel it in my throat as I reread the message 3 times, checking for anything that sounds defensive or accusatory. Finally, I close my eyes and hit send before I can chicken out and delete the whole thing. The message shows as delivered, and I set my phone face down on my desk, unable to look at it. My hands shake slightly, and I try to distract myself by organizing the pens in my desk drawer by color, but I can't focus on anything except the phone sitting there. Within 3 minutes it buzzes, and I flip it over so fast I almost drop it. Chase's response fills the screen in a wall of text that makes my stomach drop. He's angry, really angry, using words like betrayed and backstabbed and choosing someone I barely know over 6 years of friendship. He says I was supposed to help him connect with Sophia, not steal her for myself, and that he can't believe I would do this to him after everything. The messages keep coming, each one angrier than the last, and I try to respond, but before I can finish typing, he sends one final message saying he needs space, and then nothing. I send 3 follow-up texts trying to explain, trying to apologize, trying to just get him to respond, but they all show as read with no reply. I stare at my phone for 20 minutes, waiting for those 3 dots to appear showing he's typing, but they never do. The sick feeling in my stomach gets worse, and I end up lying on my bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction from the party and wondering if I should have just stayed in that corner like he told me to. The next morning, I wake up to a text from Nyla sent at midnight that I somehow missed. She's venting about receiving an official warning from housing about the party, explaining that future events at her place will be under extra scrutiny, and if there's another complaint, she could lose her apartment. I feel guilty immediately even though I wasn't the host, knowing that my presence and the attention I got somehow contributed to the noise that led to the complaint. I text back an apology, but she responds quickly saying it's not my fault, and that she takes full responsibility as the host, adding that she knew the risks when she threw a party. Her reassurance doesn't really help, because I still feel bad about the collateral damage from a night that was supposed to be fun. I spend my morning classes distracted, barely taking notes, checking my phone every few minutes to see if Chase has responded. By afternoon, I spot him leaving our shared history class, and I make a split-second decision to follow him outside. He walks fast across the quad, and I have to jog slightly to catch up, calling his name twice before he finally stops. He turns around with his arms crossed, and I insist that we need to actually talk instead of him just being angry at me through texts. He starts to walk away, but I step in front of him and say, I'm not leaving until we have an actual conversation. Something in my tone must convince him because he finally stops, and his shoulders drop slightly. He admits, quieter than I've ever heard him speak, that he hates needing a wingman in the first place. He says it makes him feel inadequate compared to guys who are naturally smooth with people, like he can't do anything on his own without someone there to make him look good. The vulnerability catches me completely off guard because Chase never talks like this, never admits to feeling less than confident about anything. I realize in that moment that his anger isn't really about me stealing Safia, it's about his own insecurity about not being enough on his own. We end up sitting on a bench near the library, and I let him talk for a while about how he's always felt like he has to perform, always has to be the guy who knows everyone and has everything together. I listen without interrupting, and when he's done, I tell him honestly that being told to be invisible furniture at that party made me feel like a prop in his story, rather than an actual person with feelings. He winces and apologizes, admitting that he was using me to make himself look better without considering what I wanted or needed. We sit in silence for a minute, and then start setting some actual boundaries. I tell him I won't be invisible furniture at parties anymore because that's degrading and not fair to ask of a friend. He agrees, and says he needs space to deal with his feelings about the Safia situation, that he can't just flip a switch and be okay with everything overnight. We acknowledge that we're not cutting each other off completely, but that our friendship needs to shift, and that we both have growing to do. It's not a happy resolution with hugs and everything going back to normal, but it feels more honest than pretending everything is fine when it clearly isn't. When we stand up to leave, he gives me a small nod and walks away, and I head back to my dorm, feeling drained, but also relieved that we at least had a real conversation. That evening, Kavya texts me saying she's hosting a low-key board game night at her place and inviting both Safia and me. The message makes it clear that this is intentional, that she wants to see how we interact in a group setting without party chaos. I show up at her apartment nervous, but determined to be myself, rather than performing or trying to impress anyone. The smaller crowd of about 8 people feels way more manageable than the loud party, and I can actually hear conversations without straining. Kavya has cooperative games set up where everyone works together instead of competing, and I notice how Safia naturally includes quieter people in decisions rather than dominating the conversation or making it about herself. We play a game where we have to work as a team to solve mysteries, and Safia keeps checking in with people who haven't spoken much, asking their opinions, and making sure everyone feels included. During one round, someone makes a joke setup that's absolutely perfect for a Chandler impression, and I slip into it automatically, doing the voice and the hand gestures before I even realize what I'm doing. I catch myself mid-impression and laugh at my own habit, feeling my face get hot with embarrassment. But instead of spiraling, I just own it and explain that I default to sitcom characters when I'm nervous, that it's like a security blanket I've relied on for years. Everyone thinks it's funny rather than weird, and someone else admits they quote Vines constantly when they're anxious. The moment of self-acceptance feels small, but significant, like I'm learning to be okay with my quirks, instead of constantly trying to hide them or apologize for them. Later that week, I'm grabbing coffee between classes when someone mentions seeing Chase at another party over the weekend, apparently flirting loudly with a group of people and making a big show of being social and charismatic. Safia hears about it when we meet up for lunch, and she mentions it to me without any drama or jealousy, just noting that Chase seems to be coping in his own way. I feel a small concern for my friend, because the description makes it sound like he's overcompensating, but I also recognize that he needs to figure out his own path without me trying to fix everything or manage his feelings. I consciously choose not to compare myself to Chase or worry about whether he's doing better socially without me around. Instead, I focus on planning a calm hangout with Safia that plays to my actual strengths, rather than forcing myself into party scenarios that make me anxious. I suggest we could bake together since she liked my stress brownies so much, or organize a Pokemon card trading session with other collectors I know from online forums. The idea of doing activities I'm genuinely good at, instead of pretending to be comfortable in loud social situations, feels like real progress. Safia lights up at the baking idea and says she's been wanting to learn how to make decent brownies for years. We plan it for the following weekend, and I find myself actually excited instead of nervous about spending time with her. That same day, Andrew posts a message in the dorm group chat with harm reduction tips about hosting responsible events, covering things like noise levels, guest limits, and how to handle neighbor complaints. I read through all of it, and then message him privately to thank him for being fair during the whole noise complaint process. He responds pretty quickly with simple advice about finding balance between pushing social boundaries and respecting personal limits. He says that growth doesn't mean becoming a completely different person, just learning to exist more comfortably in situations that used to feel impossible. His practical guidance feels way more useful than any sitcom episode I've studied, because it's specific and realistic instead of scripted for comedy. I save his message to reread later when I'm feeling anxious about social situations. 2 days later, Nyla's name popped up in my messages asking if I could help her plan a low-key gathering at her place, something quiet and responsible to show housing she could host events without chaos. I responded yes immediately because I felt partly responsible for the noise complaint attention, even though I hadn't been the host, and helping fix things seemed like the right move. We started brainstorming through text about what activities would work, settling on board games and card games that kept people engaged without getting loud. Nyla suggested keeping the guest list small, maybe 15 people maximum, and asked if I'd bring my color-coded snacks again since people had enjoyed that touch at the party. I agreed, and started making a mental list of which snacks worked best for organization, and which colors looked good together on a counter. The planning felt good, like I was contributing something useful instead of just accidentally stealing attention or causing problems. That evening, I stared at my phone for 20 minutes before finally typing out a message to Chase, keeping it simple and direct about Nyla's event, and making it clear there was no pressure. But I'd like him there if he felt comfortable coming. I hit send, and immediately regretted the wording, wondering if it sounded too casual or too formal, or too something. The text sat in my sent messages with no response, just that single check mark showing it had been delivered but not read. I forced myself to put my phone face down on my desk and tried to focus on homework, but every few minutes I'd flip it over to check for a response that hadn't come. Reaching out felt vulnerable in a way that made my chest tight, like I was admitting I still valued our friendship, even though things were complicated and weird between us. By the time I went to bed that night, Chase still hadn't responded, and I tried not to read too much into the silence. The next morning, Safia texted asking what she could bring to Nyla's event, and when I suggested she didn't need to bring anything, she insisted on contributing something. She offered to make what she called calm brownies, regular brownies without my stress-baking energy, and then asked what would make me feel comfortable at the gathering. The question caught me off guard because most people just assumed I'd be fine, or didn't think about my anxiety at all. I explained through text that smaller crowds helped, and having structured activities instead of just mingling made social situations way more manageable for me. She responded that she'd noticed I seemed more relaxed when there was something specific to do, rather than just standing around talking, and she appreciated me being honest about what I needed. Her attention to my anxiety triggers made me feel seen in a way that was different from Chase's approach of just telling me to be invisible or furniture. Between classes the next day, someone I vaguely knew from a shared class last semester stopped me in the hallway, asking if I had a minute to talk. I said sure, and they immediately launched into relaying a rumor they'd heard about me stealing Chase's crush and betraying a longtime friendship, their tone making it clear they were fishing for drama or my side of the story. I took a breath and calmly explained once that Safia hadn't been in a relationship with Chase, that they'd never defined anything or gone on actual dates, and that people are allowed to develop feelings without it being theft. The person tried to press for more details, but I cut them off politely and said I needed to get to class, walking away before the conversation could turn into more gossip fuel. My heart was pounding from the confrontation, but I felt proud of myself for not engaging beyond that simple correction, for refusing to feed into campus drama even though part of me wanted to defend myself more thoroughly. The night before Nyla's event, Safia and I met up at the library to study, and during a break we checked in about expectations for the gathering. I brought up that we should probably keep physical affection minimal if Chase showed up, not wanting to rub our developing relationship in his face when he was still dealing with hurt feelings. Safia agreed immediately and said she'd been thinking the same thing, that we were both okay taking things slowly and not making our connection the center of attention at someone else's event. The conversation felt mature and considerate, like we were building something based on mutual respect rather than just chemistry or attraction. She mentioned that she liked how thoughtful I was about other people's feelings, even when it would be easier to just do what we wanted, and I felt warm knowing she valued that quality. We agreed to mostly hang out in separate areas of Nyla's place during the event and just check in occasionally, giving Chase space if he decided to come. Saturday evening arrived, and I showed up at Nyla's apartment 30 minutes early, with 3 containers of color-coded snacks, having spent the afternoon arranging chips and pretzels and crackers by color gradient. Nyla let me in and immediately put on mellow background music, something instrumental that filled the space without demanding attention. I set up my snack arrangement on the kitchen counter while Nyla laid out board games on her coffee table and card games on her dining table. People started arriving in small groups, and by 7, the apartment held about 15 people scattered comfortably around different spaces. The vibe was completely different from the loud party, and I felt my shoulders drop from their usual tense position as I realized I could actually enjoy this without constant anxiety. Several people complimented the snack organization, and someone asked if I'd help them plan their own event sometime, which made me feel useful rather than weird about my organizational habits. I was helping set up a cooperative mystery game when Chase appeared in the doorway 30 minutes late, hesitating before stepping inside and scanning the room. He didn't immediately approach me, but he didn't leave either, instead grabbing a drink from the kitchen and joining a board game already in progress at the dining table. The tension in the room shifted slightly, a few people glancing between Chase and me, but nothing exploded or got dramatic. I took it as a positive sign that he was willing to exist in the same space, even if we weren't ready to talk yet, and I focused on explaining game rules to the group I was with. About an hour into the evening, Andrew knocked once and let himself in, doing a quick visual sweep of the noise level and guest count. He caught Nyla's eye and gave her an approving nod before heading back out without making it a big official thing. The casual check-in felt like validation that we were handling things responsibly, and Nyla visibly relaxed, knowing she was rebuilding trust with housing. I felt relieved that my involvement in this event was helping, rather than causing more problems, that I could contribute positively to someone's situation, instead of accidentally making things worse. We rotated through different games, and I found myself genuinely enjoying the structured social interaction, the way having clear activities removed the pressure of constant conversation. During a quiet moment between games, Chase stood up and caught my eye, tilting his head toward the hallway in a silent question. My heart started racing as I followed him out of the apartment into the carpeted hallway, the door clicking shut behind us and muffling the background noise. Chase leaned against the wall and crossed his arms, not in an angry way, but more like he was holding himself together. He admitted that he'd resented needing a wingman in the first place, that asking me to come to that party had made him feel inadequate, and less than compared to guys who were naturally smooth with people. The vulnerability in his voice caught me off guard after weeks of anger and deflection. He continued that watching me succeed socially by just being genuine and awkward had made him realize he'd been performing confidence instead of building real connections, that he'd been so focused on being seen as the charismatic guy that he'd forgotten how to actually connect with people. The honesty was painful to hear, but also validating, like we were finally having the real conversation that should have happened weeks ago, instead of all the defensive posturing and hurt feelings. I took a breath and shared how it had felt to be told to be furniture and invisible, explaining that his instructions had made me feel like a prop in his story, rather than a person with my own feelings and needs. Chase winced and looked down at his shoes, and after a long pause he apologized for using me to make himself look better, without considering what I wanted or how it affected me. He acknowledged that he'd been treating our friendship like it existed to serve his social goals, rather than being a mutual relationship between equals. We stood in that hallway for several more minutes working through the hurt and misunderstanding, and eventually agreed that we needed to rebuild our friendship slowly, with actual boundaries and mutual respect. It wouldn't be the same easy dynamic we'd had before, but hopefully, it would be healthier and more honest. Chase said he needed more time before we could hang out one-on-one again, but that he appreciated me inviting him tonight and giving him space to process. I told him I understood, and that I'd be here when he was ready to reconnect more fully. We went back inside separately, Chase returning to his board game and me joining a different group, and the rest of the evening continued without more drama. Back inside, I grabbed a stack of game cards from the coffee table and started setting up another round while keeping one eye on the living room where Safia had walked over to Chase. They stood near the window talking quietly, and from across the room I couldn't hear their words, but I could see their body language. Chase had his arms crossed at first, but then he relaxed them and nodded a few times. Safia touched his arm briefly in what looked like a friendly gesture, not romantic, and Chase gave her a small smile before she turned away. I focused back on arranging the cards in neat piles, trying not to stare or make assumptions about what they'd discussed. About 20 minutes later, Safia came back to where I was sitting and settled onto the couch next to me. She explained that she'd told Chase directly that she valued him as a person and thought he was great, but she wasn't romantically interested and hoped they could be friendly without weirdness. Chase had handled it really well, according to her, listening without getting defensive or making it awkward. I felt this warm surge of hope that maybe we were all finding our way toward something better, some version of coexistence that didn't require anyone to pretend or perform. The conversation felt like progress, like adults actually communicating instead of just avoiding each other or letting resentment build up silently. Someone across the room knocked over a cup of soda that spilled across the hardwood floor, and suddenly everyone jumped up to help. The liquid spread fast toward the couch, and we needed to move the furniture quickly before it got soaked. I grabbed one end of the couch while someone else grabbed the other, and as we lifted it, someone yelled out, "Pivot!" in a joking reference to my party moment weeks ago. This time, the callback felt invited and useful, rather than me desperately trying to fit in with borrowed sitcom lines. Even Chase cracked a small smile from across the room where he was helping move a chair out of the spill zone. We pivoted the couch successfully, and someone else grabbed towels to clean up the mess. The shared joke felt like a tiny bridge between our old friendship and whatever came next. proof that some of our history could carry forward in a lighter way. I caught Chase's eye for a second, and he gave me a quick nod before turning back to help with cleanup. The moment was small, but it mattered, showing that maybe we could exist in the same spaces without everything feeling heavy and complicated. As people started gathering their things and heading out around 11, Nyla found me in the kitchen where I was packing up the leftover snacks into containers. She thanked me specifically for helping restore her reputation with housing and making the event feel welcoming rather than chaotic. I deflected the credit automatically, pointing out that she was the one who created the space for people to gather responsibly, and that everyone had cooperated to keep things calm. She shook her head and insisted that my organizational skills and calm energy had helped set the tone, that people followed my lead when it came to being considerate. Her gratitude felt good, but I was learning not to need constant validation from everyone around me. I could appreciate when my contributions actually helped without making it the center of my identity or requiring praise to feel okay about myself. Nyla gave me a quick hug before I left and told me I was welcome at her place anytime, which felt like genuine friendship rather than social obligation. Sophia caught me on the stairs outside and suggested we take a walk around campus, since it was still early and the weather was nice. We wandered past the library and through the quad, talking about the evening and how different it felt from that first chaotic party. She brought up the idea of going on a proper coffee date this weekend, somewhere we could focus on getting to know each other without party drama or friend complications hanging over us. I agreed enthusiastically, feeling this warm, hopeful sensation in my chest about building something real at a pace that worked for both of us. The hope felt different from fantasy or anxiety, just genuine anticipation of spending time with someone who liked me as I actually was. We walked for almost an hour, circling back toward the dorms, and when we said goodnight, she squeezed my hand briefly before heading inside. I floated back to my room feeling lighter than I had in weeks, like maybe things were actually working out in a realistic, sustainable way. The next morning, I woke up and immediately grabbed my phone to text Chase. I typed out a heads up about my upcoming date with Sophia, framing it as a courtesy rather than asking for permission. I explained that I wanted him to hear it from me directly, and that I hoped we could continue rebuilding our friendship, even though things were complicated. I hit send before I could overthink it, and then waited anxiously for his response. It came about 20 minutes later, just 3 words followed by nothing else. He said thanks for telling me, and that was it. No enthusiasm, but also no anger or accusations. The minimal response felt like progress toward coexistence, even if we weren't back to easy friendship yet. I could accept that he needed time and space to process his feelings, that rebuilding trust would take more than one conversation or one considerate text message. That night, I pulled out my journal and wrote about not needing scripts for every interaction anymore. I reflected on how my sitcom notes had helped me get started with socializing, giving me frameworks when I had no idea what to do. But the genuine connection with Sophia had come from dropping the performance and just being my awkward, authentic self. I kept my screenshot collection of conversation tips, but I was relying on them less now, using them as occasional reference rather than constant crutch. The shift from performance to authenticity felt scary, but also freeing, like I was finally learning to trust my actual personality instead of borrowing someone else's charm. I wrote about how people worth knowing would appreciate the real me, Pokemon collection and color coding habits and all, rather than some performed version designed to make me seem cooler or smoother. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia, and when I opened it, I found a photo of her brownie attempt. The brownies were somehow both burned on top and raw in the middle, a culinary disaster that made me laugh out loud in my empty room. We texted back and forth about her baking failure, and she suggested we could bake together this weekend, so I could teach her my stress baking techniques. The playful intimacy of planning a low-key domestic activity together made me smile wider than any grand romantic gesture would have. I realized I was excited about the simple moment of standing in a kitchen together measuring ingredients, not because it was dramatic or impressive, but because it felt genuine and sustainable. Our connection was building through small, real interactions, rather than intense performances, and that felt like something that could actually last. Before bed, I opened the dorm group chat and scrolled back to find the harm reduction resources Andrew had shared about hosting events and managing social situations. I skimmed through the documents about setting boundaries, creating inclusive spaces, and handling conflicts before they escalated. The practical information felt more useful than any sitcom episode I'd studied, giving me concrete tools rather than just borrowed personality traits. I saved the links to reference for future gatherings, appreciating that preparation didn't have to mean performance. I could be thoughtfully ready for social situations without scripting every word or trying to channel someone else's confidence. Being prepared could just mean having good information and realistic strategies, rather than memorized lines. A week and a half after Nyla's event, I noticed that the ambient tension between Chase and me had reduced to something manageable, if not completely comfortable. We weren't hanging out one-on-one yet, but we could exist in the same group settings without awkwardness taking over everything. We exchanged occasional texts about neutral topics like upcoming exams or campus events, keeping things friendly without forcing deep conversations. The functional coexistence wasn't our old easy friendship where we could joke about anything, but it was stable and respectful. I could see it as a realistic foundation for whatever came next, whether that meant slowly rebuilding closeness or just maintaining friendly distance. Either way felt okay, because we were treating each other like people rather than props or obstacles. I finally put away my label maker after using it obsessively for the past 2 weeks to organize everything in my room. The small shift felt symbolic as I tucked it into my desk drawer, keeping the tools that genuinely helped me while letting go of the need to control and label everything perfectly. My Tupperware collection stayed organized and ready for the next time I stress-baked, because that preparation actually made me feel better. Life was messy and social situations were unpredictable, full of moments I couldn't script or control no matter how much I studied. But I was learning that my authentic, awkward self was enough, that the people worth knowing would appreciate my genuine personality rather than any performed version. I kept my sitcom notes in a folder, but I didn't open them as often, relying more on my own instincts and less on borrowed confidence. The balance felt right, holding on to what helped while releasing what held me back from being real. That's it for today's story. Thank you for spending a few minutes here. It really means a lot. I hope it brought a little warmth or a small reminder of the good things in life. Subscribe if you want to come back for more.